Hi, my name is Belkacel Hanade. This is my EUB343 showcase. I'm in the workshop on Wednesday from 11:30 to 2:30, and my tutors are Danielle Gordon and Dr. Meredith Spiner. So the following school that I went to was a Peter VI coeducational school, and it was located in a low socioeconomic area. There were about 500 students from Peter VI, and the classroom that I was based in was a Year 4 classroom. So they were between about 9 to 10 years of age. There were 24 students in my class, and they were a very mixed ability classroom. The classroom had access to communal iPads and laptops. However, the school did not have a bring your own device system. So the key learning intention that I chose to focus on was part of the Year 4 maths curriculum in the number and algebra strand. So the following curriculum area that I chose to focus on was to be able to develop efficient and mental and written strategies and use appropriate digital technologies for multiplication and division when there is no remainder. So my key learning intention was for students to be able to utilize the doubling strategy to solve multiplication problems with 2s, 4s, and 8s multiplication. So the diagnostic assessment that I chose to use was a written pretest. This was conducted at the beginning of a unit and focused on the students' knowledge of multiplication strategies and their knowledge of basic multiplication facts. So to the right, you can see the pretest that I chose to use. So that last question really focused on students being able to apply their knowledge to unfamiliar situations. So that allowed me to distinguish the students that were a little bit ahead of the rest of the class. So at the end of the diagnostic assessment, I collected all the samples, and before the next lesson, I was able to analyze all the results. And I chose to focus on a number of key areas. And I also was able to note a number of misconceptions through student conversation and further questioning at the end of the diagnostic assessment. So you can see one of the samples that I collected. So this is from one of the students that completed the diagnostic assessment. And you can see the misconceptions that is held by this student. So in particular, not being able to use the doubling strategy, as well as not being able to use abstraction to solve the higher order question. So this is just a spreadsheet that I created to identify the students and identify the key areas that they did not understand. So all students were able to recognize the picture and were able to convert them to numbers to solve really basic multiplication facts. A lot of students, however, were not able to use multiplication strategies to solve the problem, and when prompted further, they actually used repeated addition. So this was probably the most common misconception held by students, where students use repeated addition to solve multiplication. Therefore, the following lessons really focused on developing those key learning areas. So following the diagnostic assessment, students were placed into maths groups based on their ability level, their readiness level, as well as their learning preferences. This can be seen towards the left, with the koalas being the students who required additional support and really required that explicit instruction. And the platypuses were those students that were working at an A level, who were able to apply their knowledge to higher order situations. This allowed me to differentiate the learning experience for each student by providing differentiated materials, varying levels of support, as well as additional challenges. So following the diagnostic assessment, I had students engage in a number of hands-on activities to revise their multiplication strategies and facts. This allowed students to revise their knowledge as well as build on their understanding of multiplication. So it really allowed students to be a little bit more confident with their skills before they had to learn a new concept. So the second lesson following the diagnostic assessment was where I first introduced students to the concept of doubles to solve 4's multiplication. So we revised the concept of doubling in the warm-up, and then we moved on to a whole class lesson where I had all students on the floor using manipulatives and mini whiteboards to really engage them and really have them visualize that double strategy. So I tried to use the gradual release of responsibility model to model something explicitly to the students and use strategic questioning to slowly release that to the students to be able to apply that strategy. At the end of the lesson, I had the students complete an exit ticket as part of their formative assessment. So I asked them to solve 11 times 4 using the doubling strategy. To the right, you can see a couple of the responses that the students gave me. These students either attempted to use the doubling strategy without success or did not understand the doubling strategy to be able to apply it. So the evidence revealed that approximately 52% of the students did not understand the concept. So about half of them were able to apply that concept to the unfamiliar situation, however, the other half were not. And the most common misconception was caused by the inability to use abstraction, as well as not being able to apply it to an unfamiliar situation. Therefore, in the following lesson, I really focused on using manipulatives and tiered word problems to help those students that were really struggling to further explain that concept to them. So in the following lesson, I created a resource, which was a laminated card, which students could actually use to refer to when solving the course multiplication. So this is just assisted the students who required a visual representation, as it allowed them to write the number in that first box and physically double it as they went through that card. And it also helped the students that were at a higher level to decompose those more complex word problems. The second formative assessment was a sample of student work. So to the right, you can see one student who attempted to use the doubling strategy. However, the lack of multiplication facts and abstraction really posed a barrier for the strategy to work effectively for the student. So 65% of students were able to use the strategy successfully. However, there were still a handful of students who were not. So I really emphasized the use of manipulatives and visual strategies for students to be able to apply that to higher order situations, including worded problems. So following the gradual release model, I had students create a flipbook to display the association between the strategies. So between the multiplying by 2, multiplying by 4, and multiplying by 8. So it actually displayed the various representations of doubles, including how it would look, how it would sound, a visual representation of solving the strategy, as well as the number sentence that you would use to solve the strategy. A lot of students found this really helpful when solving it, as they could see the association between what they learned and what they were learning. So for the third lesson, I used Plick as an interactive strategy for students to assess their knowledge. This allowed me to instantly identify those students who required that additional support, and it also allowed me to see the misconceptions that they held, as I actually included some misconceptions that I thought that they would have. So many students still lacked that understanding of how to apply that strategy effectively, and the error rate was actually quite high, with only 48% of students actually understanding how to apply that strategy. So the following lesson was again focused on re-explaining that concept with manipulatives and really focusing on those visual strategies for students to be able to see exactly how it would be doubled. So the final formative assessment was actually assessment through learning. So I had students fill out this table with an interactive activity where they had to roll the dice and write a number sentence to multiply by 8. So this hands-on approach allowed students to express their understanding in a variety of... So the sample of student work, which is actually student 10, shows a significant improvement in the conceptual understanding of multiplication and multiplication strategies. And it actually showed me that he was able to understand how to use that strategy, and that he understood that you needed to multiply the number 3 times, not just once. So the student understands that the number must be doubled 3 times, which can be seen in his use of visual strategies just there. And you can actually see that he's attempted to use that visual strategy by using the arrows to double it 3 times. The visual strategy, the visual diagram, also reinforces the concept of groups of. So showing me that he's able to create an array and relate that to the number sentence. So this table here just shows the progression between that first formative assessment and the final formative assessment. So there was actually an 82% success rate following the change in instructional method. So when I changed my own pedagogy and my own instructional method from being from directly relating my own understandings to the student to coming from a place of student knowledge, I was actually able to get more students to understand the concept. The majority of students were able to articulate the strategy and apply it to unfamiliar situations. And when prompted, a lot of students actually could explain that strategy to me. So this is just a brief comparison of student number 10, whose diagnostic assessment was displayed in, prior in this video, as well as their final formative assessment. So the first diagnostic assessment shows lack of understanding and a lack of concept of multiplication, as well as a lack of correspondence to the problem. In the final formative assessment strategy, he was actually able to use abstraction to convert the number sentence into a diagram, and he was able to use the multiplication strategy effectively to solve the problem. These are just my references for the learning. Thank you.